Hey Tim, look at this.
Needs work.
Hey Tim, how about this?
Still needs work.
Darn it. How about this?
Nice, high five. Hi everyone, welcome to TMI. I'm Tim.
I'm Michael, and this is Adnan.
This is my sandwich.
Yes.
Thanks,
Well,
Eric.
Where'd he go?
Our staff, you know,
Okay.
we're in between sandwich makers. Is what's happening.
Yeah, this
More
one.
mayo next time.
Well, Eric's gone.
So today on TMI, we would like to welcome back Adnan for the One4U Show. Again, check out the One4U podcast. Do that lovely little thing of yours, Tim, where you put it up on the. Look at that! You're so good at that.
Oh,
And today we were talking about the art of storytelling in video games. So what we're going to do, I just want to shoot off a couple quick, some of my favorite, quick lists off the top of my head that I haven't prepared or anything. Quick list of stories that I absolutely loved in games. Actually, let's just shoot them out if you think about them. I'm going to start with Ocarina of Time, Legend of Zelda 64. That one for me.
Recently, The Last of Us.
I need to play that.
You need to play that, so I won't. If I talk about it, I'll try not to hit up anything.
Yeah.
There's a possibility on whatever we may talk about in this episode, it could be spoiled for you. Spoiler warning. So if you hear us talk about something, that's possible we could talk about it in a spoiler fashion. So you have been warned.
And it's funny though. If they're skipping ahead, they should see something. When we're on to the next thing, we should all go like, all right, next thing with our hands. So if they roll through and
They
they
look
see
and they
the
see
hands,
the little thing like,
oh, there it is. That's what I
Spoiler.
should say. Okay, it's that spoilers over is what that'll be. Heavy Rain.
all right.
For me, I also just finished that, and wow, I think that jumped somewhere in my top 10
that game is fantastic.
of favorite.
That was my favorite PS3 game of all time until The Last of Us.
Until The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Jinx.
You both owe me a Coke.
Oh, hey,
Eric!
how does that work?
One Coke, put it on their tab.
I'm gonna call Sandy. She should get us a Coke. Hey,
Sandy?
she's dancing somewhere. And
Hi, Sandy.
Alright.
You know what? I was gonna say Star Fox, but I don't know if there's such a light story in there. Again with Metroid, very light story.
The Walking Dead, which you also just finished.
Walking Dead, great story. Great
Um,
story in that.
My favorite video game of all time, Beyond Good and Evil.
Oh,
My
my favorite of all time, Conker's Bad Fur Day.
That's a fantastic game. Hilarious game.
I was gonna say, Tim, you were talking about you've played Lego Star Wars on
Yeah.
on your computer.
Mm-hmm.
That's
yeah.
it.
Well, it's got a video screen.
Oh, well, no, that's great because I mean
Yeah.
I remember playing like SimCity on my computer, but then as soon as I got my hands on actually I still play SimCity on my PC and also The Sims every once in a blue moon. I go back and forth, but I don't. I haven't played on the computer in a while because I don't know if I need this. If this makes me feel at home, so I mean, does it feel natural to you on the?
I guess so. Well, and if you watch the last episode, I didn't really play video games as a kid, but the exception to the rule was computer games, and I did do a whole lot of those.
Like, what did you do? What have you done?
I did a few Lego things, did kind of the Sim Craze, and I did Roller Coaster Tycoon and Zoo Tycoon.
Minesweeper.
A whole lot of Minesweeper, yay!
I was gonna say, and we talked about it briefly in between episodes, that Star Wars. We'll go off of that. Isn't it interesting how is it still storytelling even though it is already a story that has been done?
Well, it can be. I mean, there's more to storytelling than just the narrative, because obviously the narrative of Lego Star Wars is very much there and very much intact, and they don't take too many liberties with it. But there's also the performance of it too, and that is the challenge of doing Lego Star Wars, because imagine the storytellers or the game makers or whatever you call those guys.
Developers.
There you go. Thank you. Odd man out. When the developer sat down to do Lego Star Wars, they've got to think, okay, how are we going to tell this story in a unique way? Because not only is it a story that already exists from a very familiar film, it's a story that's been done in games and adapted games and offshoot games for years and years and years. There's tons of predecessors to the Lego Star Wars franchise. And, they really decided to just make it their own. And, we're Legos, we're fun, We're quirky. We really like, kind of making stuff for kids. So let's just go whole hog on the comedy on this and be absolutely ridiculous.
Did you enjoy the fact that there is no voice work in the Lego Star Wars games? They're completely mute. It's all told, and you know exactly what's going on. Even if you did never watched a Star Wars film, you can tell because they're like, pew, pew, and then like funny stuff will happen. But there's no real voice work in a Lego game until much later.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think that's just a tribute to how clear cut the storytelling is in Star Wars. You have your bad guys and your good guys, and it makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually never really caught me off guard because they're very expressive. They don't really talk during the game. They don't have to.
And expressive for Lego faces too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like because I know in cartooning a lot we can stretch faces and we can do all sorts of things, but I mean they stay in that block head, that little, and that's just. I mean the expressions within those, but even then the bodies barely move too, and look at how much we got out of it.
Yeah.
Do you think it is essential, though, to have seen Star Wars to get that story?
Gosh.
I think to get all of it, yeah.
Okay.
Because as much as you can do from it, it is an interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more so like when you watch it, a Star Wars movie, it's more focused. And that the point of the Lego games is that since they're very based for kids, you do a lot of knocking stuff down and building stuff up. It's not a true interpretation of it. It's a very good Lego interpretation.
Oh,
of it,
absolutely.
but it's not going to get everything out of it because as much as great as they did without dialogue, there are words there. Like the kid saw it and doesn't know what the Force is. Like, oh, cool, he can move stuff with his hands. There's no name for that at the time,
Right.
Yeah. So if you're playing the Lego games, it gives you a good gist. And when you watch like a Star Wars movie after playing the Lego games, you're like, oh, okay, so that's why they do this thing or this thing, or that's really what that character's motivation is.
Right. My folks always said that growing up, they said we thought it was important that you knew why things were the way they were and where they came from, which is why I'm kind of always such a stickler for seeing things in sequence and seeing what came first because I want to get the joke. Like when there's a scene in the movie where Luke's like, I see a couple of banthas when I don't see it. He said, oh, he pops up. But if you look in the, it's over. But if you look, in the game, if you haven't played the Lego Star Wars, the original trilogy, he's looking down, at the banthas, and 3PO is milking the bantha, if you notice, and then you're like, that didn't happen in the. I do think it's funny because I play devil's advocate and I kind of it's an open-ended question. I do think that it stands very well on its own, just playing it. But I do also think that there are those things that you need to be able to, all those jokes to get the joke.
Sure.
I remember reading in either my Game Pro or Game Informer because I subscribed to both way back when. Spielberg visited E3, I believe it was, one of the first times that Steven Spielberg did, and he said, I can't, something to the lines of, I can't wait for the day when people cry in video games the way that we do at movies.
We've gotten there.
I firmly believe so.
You just did, because I this is the first time I've talked to you now that you've beaten The Walking Dead. Spoiler, did you cry at the end of that game? Because a lot of people did.
I got to think about it. Notice.
I didn't get teary cry. However, I was very emotionally drained and distraught.
Because you brought up Spielberg, and I'm remembering something from earlier in the year. There was like this big event that had Spielberg and it had George Lucas, and they talked about movies as industry, but they also touched on video games. And where I think Lucas is kind of missing out on stuff, he says that you don't have an emotional connection with video games because what his take on it is when you put the control in the hands of the player, you've already detached them from everything that's going on, which is completely backwards because you're there.
I heard a retort coming on from this guy.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's even when you give the player the control of the character, it becomes a vicarious experience, not the passive experience of a film.
Right.
You're heavily involved. That character is you. It's almost like a metaphor for Avatar, or Avatar's metaphor for. There's a connection.
There's two great examples, I'd say. Because let's bring up The Walking Dead.
Okay.
You felt the need, because I know you, and this is probably the same way you, me, and your brother also felt the need. What happens in this game? You're a dude who was going to prison, and now all of a sudden you're trying to survive with these survivors because of the zombie apocalypse. But you have been placed in the care of a little girl named Clementine.
Okay.
You would have made sure to do everything to keep her safe.
Everything in my power.
In your power to keep Clementine safe.
Just today I said that. I said, I mean, I always, even in life, I mean, you try to keep people happy and always be the best mediator that you can, especially when other people get heated and upset. And as even much as I was trying to play truthfully through that game, it's time for you to wake up.
Time.
I even said to my brother today, at the end of the day, the only thing I care about is making sure this little girl is okay.
Right.
And you just reminded me too, Final Fantasy VII and the Kingdom Hearts games.
Kingdom Hearts.
Which I thought is kind of a testament to writing in the way that, okay, let's take all of these Final Fantasies that have their own stories to start. Let's take all of these Disney characters that also have their own movies and stories and everything. Let's somehow smack them together, because you know what? We'll do a whole episode on Frank. We'll have a whole episode on Frank. We'll make a link to that later about who Frank is for me. But it sounded like an idea that Frank had, and they were like, "It's never gonna work," but it worked. And even just following Sora and Riku and Kairi, for me, it's one of my favorite stories.
On the search for King Mickey.
I know. Shucks. I think there's something like you said, the way we connect. You know, when it's actually in your hands. I've read books where I've been right there, especially when it's to choose your own. I know R.L. Stein
Flip to this
do
page.
those. Yeah, do those.
Oh yeah.
And there's been points where or even if you do D&D, you know, which I've only done a couple times with friends who do it a lot, and they have me down. I'm like, oh, this is fun. Or when we act, or when we're on stage and we're becoming people. Even so, because acting, I feel like I'm also doing it for other people. You know, for an audience, it's really little for me as it is for them, because I'm trying to give them a show. But I don't think anything has drawn me in as much as a video game has, in the way that I become so invested playing as a character. I don't think of anything other than a video game has gotten me as invested in a story.
And then even just retelling stories in the same kinds of universes in different ways.
Like you were there.
I
was there. I was that person.
Because the difference, like, if you look at, like Walking Dead and The Last of Us, they're both, like, apocalyptic, kind of zombie kind of games. There's an infection going on. And both games involve you taking care of a smaller girl protagonist also.
Right.
With Clementine in The Walking Dead, what's interesting is that she's, like, 5, 6, something like that?
No, 8.
8? Okay, so she's really young. But this has just happened all of a sudden, and now you're trying to protect her through all this. And the thing that's fascinating about The Last of Us is that Ellie is a character, she's 14, and you're protecting her. But this game takes place 20 years after the outbreak has initially started. So the difference being is that, you know, Clementine knows what the world used to be like. And as you go through The Last of Us with Ellie, she's discovering, like, she's looking at these old buildings that we have all lived in and going, what did you guys used to do in those? And she's like, you come across a record store and she'd be like, what are these? And stuff like that. And you have to, and she's like, oh, well, you see, we used to do this. Because she has no context of a world before the outbreak at all. That's why.
Right.
So it's very fascinating to just be able to tell similar stories, but have totally different stories altogether in the same kind of a universe, you know?
Do we think every story, as we're winding this episode to a close, do we think every story transfers to a game? And can every game story transfer to other mediums?
No. Because the thing with other medias is that they have more of a time constraint, too. I would say, less with books. Books have the least amount of time constraint, I would say.
Russian novels much?
A movie is going to be from an hour and 20 minutes to about 3 hours.
Right.
You don't really get longer than 3 hours, you know?
But that's Peter Jackson.
Well, and then you make multiple movies out of that, and the game can go, like, maybe even, like, an hour long to 100 hours long to tell whatever story or do whatever it wants to do. You know, it's very different to tell stories in that manner. The closest thing to it would be doing a video game stuff, would be doing it in, like, an extended web series. Not a web series, a television series, like a Band of Brothers. How that was so much hours worth of content, but because it was this many stretched about, that's the best way you could do, say, a video game movie based, a video game type of adaptation based on Uncharted. That's what they're doing with Halo. That seems like a great idea. I'm not sure. I don't really know if it's going to be based on the story, if it's a side story. If they were to do something with Gears of War, that feels like you could constrain that to a movie. But those games were actually pretty lengthy for shooters, like each individual game. And I remember how you were attached to Dom from Gears of War 1 to 2, and then when he, spoiler, 3, he dies, which I got spoiled for me at the midnight launch. Yeah, he dies in Gears of War 3, and you were just like, oh no, dude, because you went through 3 games with him, and you're like,
that to happen.
So in response to
Spoiler
Mikey's
alert.
question, then maybe.
Yeah, I think
That's what it sounds like.
and it's funny you did bring that up, time constraint, because we had that conversation a while ago, and I think that's
I think that's true.
Okay, got it.
but that is something that's so important, and I think if we translate anything out of this episode, that for me that is one of the most profound things I've ever heard in talking about how stories translate. You know, especially when we're looking at maybe we found it. Maybe that's why video game movies.
You're trying to tell an 8-hour story in 2 hours, usually.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Alright.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode, and we'd also like to thank Adnan of One4U. Again, we're going to give you the link to his channel. Make sure you
It's over
listen.
there.
I'm going to listen again.
Subscribe right there if you're there for the first time and you enjoy it. I really appreciate it. If you're coming here from one of my videos, these guys are awesome. I was on a previous episode, and that's how I got the sandwich punch card. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So watch the show enough. Maybe we'll send you a... No, you guys aren't going to send him a sandwich.
I haven't even gotten my sandwich.
Oh, well then, if,
If
no
you want to be on
sandwich...
the show, if you want to eat a sandwich, be on the show.
There you go. That's what he meant. So subscribe to these guys. These guys are awesome. They have lots of great artistic tips for you. Lots of great mind-provoking conversations to have. And I appreciated these guys' support and whatnot. And thank you. Thank you guys for having me on the
No
show.
problem. And we'll see you guys later.
Hi everyone, don't forget if you'd like to send a question to Michael and myself to possibly be answered on the show, you can reach us at tmi.art.productions@gmail.com.
And be sure to support some of our other artist friends out there, like Adnan at the One4U podcast, best video game podcast that I've ever listened to.